what is post-exertional malaise as it relates to a person with with a complex
So
illness?
I can definitely say, as someone who this has definitely come up more so in the last 3 years, right, as opposed to the entire time that I've kind
Mm-hmm.
of been in the field. But really, how I would
Mm-hmm.
say that it's been defined for self and those in which I work with is really being able to see significant or drastic changes of symptoms following, rather it's mental exertion, physical exertion, sometimes executive functioning, right? And that exhaustion and those feelings
Mm-hmm.
kind
Yeah.
of lasting for some people days, for some people hours, and it comes right after, kind of like after maybe completing a task of some sort. Very early, I would say during
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic, and even now, I will have some clients that maybe come in and they, kind of express feeling brain fog, right, and or they're experiencing
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
migraines, dizziness, light sensitivity, and body pains, a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
that are very much so impacting their mental health, right? They're feeling anxious because it's like, well, what is going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, all I did was walk to the mailbox and back,
Yeah.
and now I'm 12, 48 hours later, I'm kind of having these symptoms. So there was a lot of anxiousness for some people in terms of just not having kind of, again, like terminology to put to what was coming up. Depression, because for some people, they were experiencing having to stay in
Mm-hmm.
bed, right? It's one thing to rest by choice, and it's one thing to have to do it by force because your body just needs that time.
Mm.
So I will say, for me, it kind of brought an awareness of, clearly there's something that's happening, especially as I mentioned, this being kind of a, a theme with a few clients. I won't say that it's many, but I will say a few that are able to kind of put words to what's coming up for them. That really brought awareness of, like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like, there's something to again kind of like explore here in terms of like how maybe even I have to change my approach and how I'm working, with individuals. And especially considering it kind of varied person to person. I mean, for some people, it was literally climbing stairs. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
I walked the same route that I've always walked. Family functions, trying to hold conversation, remember whose kid belongs to who, is became exhausting. Um,
Yep.
and as
Yeah.
you mentioned, in terms of long COVID patients, or even those who maybe are in kind of like still like the early stages of trying to identify what pacing is, it was a struggle to accept
Mm-hmm.
a new norm and changes to the body, which I will say definitely could, for some people, brought about a sense of like changes to their identity, right? For some people that maybe were accustomed to
Mm-hmm.
being
Mm-hmm.
active and running and things of that sort, now they're having to again kind of shift in one way or another. And being able to know how, for some people, it's kind of like, hey, is this a one day off that I'm feeling? So let me try it again the next day. And it kind of led to overdoing it and crashes. So a lot of
Mm.
it was really kind
Mm-hmm.
of,
Mm-hmm.
bringing awareness to some of those symptoms. Again, having and being open to clients coming in and educating, because these are experiences that they are having, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is definitely one of the important pieces, which is why I always speak to, therapy in general showing up as collaborative, right? The 45 minutes or 90 minutes that we're
Mm-hmm.
sharing space, I
Yes.
can, speak and discuss what's coming up there, but, life is experienced outside of the time that you're in therapy. So being open to taking in, kind of again what's being felt, and some of those experiences was definitely key in being able to kind of put more of a definition for self, so that I can be in more of a support to those that I'm working with.
Yeah. And I love what you said about post exertional malaise showing up as depression, because I don't think that a lot of people consider that. And so a part of the question was, what constitutes this exertion for a patient? So we know that it can be very much a physical
Yeah.
reaction to
Hmm.
overexertion, right? The malaise part is the depression part. I don't think we explore that. And I actually, before you said it, I hadn't even thought about that. But that is something that a lot of people who struggle with post exertional
Yeah.
malaise struggle
Yeah.
with, is that depression part. Um, why do you think? I know you touched on it a little bit, but tell me why you think it is such a major sticking point for people like me who struggle with a complex illness. And if you can, tell me what you think about the struggle
Mhm.
for people of color. in recognizing
Okay,
that they have
sure.
PEM?
So I would say as far as as far as looking at it in terms of depression, kind of looking at it even on a even larger
Mhm.
scale in terms of just the, for a lot of people, just the pandemic in itself brought about a lot of, kind of views in terms of depression, let alone when you're, factoring in, PEM as you mentioned, right? Those moments of not getting out of bed, right? Still trying to, some of, again, light sensitivity, you're in the darkness for some people. There's the isolation of it.
Mhm.
There's, again, pain that seems as though that there's nothing that can be done, and it can absolutely begin to kind of touch on like a place of like autonomy, right? Like, hey, if something's wrong, I should be able to kind of fix.
Mhm.
And I think that when that shows up in, kind of some of those things, but when that shows up as far as in for individuals that identify as, within like the BIPOC community, that touches on a lot, right? Those are sometimes they could be a lot of triggers, right?
Mhm.
You're saying not to get out of bed, for some
Mhm.
people, it's internalized messages that, rest is equated to laziness. It's messages that, productivity is, kind of viewed based on what you're doing, how many things that you've gotten done. So a lot of the times when we're, I mean, obviously there's, I'm sure, tons of research out there, but for, in terms of what I've seen and those that have been able to kind of share in their experiences, really, again, kind of being even further kind of, pushed to being pushed to a place where, you kind of feel very much so kind of like ostracized in some ways. And those
Mhm.
things already exist
Mhm.
within the community for people of color already. Right? There's,
Mhm.
I, having to go to doctors
Mhm.
and advocate for, tests to be ran because, you are able to feel changes in your body that perhaps the medical system's objective tests aren't kind of bringing up. So, it can definitely
Mhm.
become defeating to feel as though I'm constantly asking for help. It's kind of like I'm throwing up a life jacket and no one's kind of, attempting to rescue me in some ways. So that feeling of depression kind of
Mhm.
shows up, not just from a somatic place, but also in terms of just kind of like a cultural identity for some people.
Very true. As we learn more about long COVID, especially, right, and other chronic illnesses, um, tell me, there are going to be people that you see, including me, and you may have already seen this type of patient where they're like, "Look, I am not stopping
Hmm.
because of no PEM. Okay, I am not going to stop
Hmm.
working. I can't stop working.
Yeah.
I can't stop taking care of my kids. I can't stop, meeting the needs of my spouse or my partner.
Yeah.
I just can't, my life just can't stop. I have to push through because that's what we're
Hmm.
taught, especially people of color, especially women. I have to do this in order to meet the eight ball. What do you think are the effects of people who have a hard time accepting that they
Hmm.
have post-exertional malaise? And what could possibly be the mental health effects of that? Of a person that
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
doesn't stop.
So in terms of that kind of, as you mentioned, that person that kind of just won't stop, right? One of the things that I would definitely say is being able to, as you mentioned moments ago, right? Being able to take into account the many identities that, our clients are kind of are that they're covering essentially, right? They are head of households. They are, for some, they are the primary parent. They are the breadwinners. I mean, it shows up in a variety of ways in terms of the hats that some of our clients wear. So some of it is also, I would say, in terms of how are we going about educating about pacing, right? Because I think that sometimes that idea of like pacing can
Mhm.
for some people can be interpreted as, hey, we want you to do absolutely nothing, almost like deconditioning in a way, right? We want you to really kind of just like stop. So it
Mm.
definitely falls on how we're educating people about it. And in terms of some of the effects, I mean, the things that will continue to kind of surface will be the frequency and just kind of like crashing, not really being able to kind of
Mhm.
just, do
Yeah.
your daily activities to
Mhm.
really kind of uphold those many tasks and hats that, that they're wearing. If your primary role is being the head of that household and you're, having to be down and out multiple days on end, how is that kind of affecting other things, right? So there's like a residual effect of that. In terms of when we're not listening to our bodies,
Mhm.
there's prolonged recovery period, right? Perhaps, getting to a place where we are able to incorporate pacing. Maybe maybe we're looking at a difference of days to weeks to months, as opposed to being able to kind of listen a little sooner, being able to recognize what some of those early warning signs look like for our body, right? Hey, if I know I've went out on a walk and I'm starting to feel some things, being able to kind of recognize a baseline is definitely of importance.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that definitely will continue is more intensified symptoms, right? Again, that the brain fog, the chronic
Mm-hmm.
pains, there's so many things that will kind of continue without really having that pacing in place,
Mm-hmm.
which ultimately increases, the chances of depression, anxiety, and for some people even, excuse me, for some people even experiencing suicidal ideation, because it's kind of like, where does relief kind of come from?
Yes, Lord.
Um,
Mm.
so, in
Ooh.
terms of,
Mm-hmm.
as we're educating clients of pacing, as clinicians, as, professionals as well, we have to also incorporate that into, how we are engaging with. For instance, I've had some clients that are like, hey, like, I cannot look at this screen and talk to you and kind of bring forward what I had to say. So it's either you hear what I have to say and not look at
Yeah.
me, or you look at me for, right? So some of that, as a clinician, as I kind of was
Mm-hmm.
hinting earlier,
Yeah.
required a lot of transitions on my part, right? Being able to kind of like, hey, like, camera on so I
Mm-hmm.
know that you're there, you're safe, and then camera off so that you're able to still have a place to process some of these things that are happening to you in real time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being able to have, reduced session
Mm-hmm.
times because the executive functioning needed to kind of sustain a 45-minute conversation or a 90-minute conversation for some people is exhausting, right? So, as we're talking about putting some of
Mm-hmm.
these practices in place, we have to ensure, again, as professionals, that we are, putting things in place that people that are experiencing PEM have access to, right? So which requires for some of us
Mm-hmm.
kind of stepping
Mm-hmm.
outside of our norm, right? So that in a way kind of allows us to kind of see, what some of our clients are going through when they're having to adjust and create new norms. As
Mm-hmm.
professionals, we should be open to
Mm-hmm.
doing the same. So really, really just being able to recognize like that kind of go, go, go mentality. For some people, it's how they've gotten by, right? You're asking them to change parts of self. That's how they've been able to accomplish, job stability. They've been able to accomplish a lot. So I think that the biggest part of it is
Mm-hmm.
how we, how pacing is kind of communicated, and having more, resources such as this and platforms such as this that can really kind of appropriately speak
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
kind of what pacing is, versus that idea of like, hey, we just want you to rest and do absolutely, nothing, in a way.
And yeah, I think just to kind of concretely answer the question about what's the effect of continued exertion, that uh, I think the depression and other psychological issues arise because there has to be, and I'm sure you would agree, a complete overhauling in
Yep.
self identity, how
Hmm.
we
Yeah.
actualize who we are, right? And like you said, on top of not just what
Hmm.
society has said about us, all of us, people of color included, but the messages that we've been telling ourselves
Yeah.
based upon family of origin, which you and I have, we've been working on for years, um, and just the messages that you send to yourself, the
Hmm.
things that you teach yourself, the things that you've learned about yourself, everything
Yeah.
has to be changed when you um, when you realize that you struggle with something like
Absolutely.
post-exertional malaise. Nothing is the same. Nothing has been the same for me once I realized that if I do too much of this,
Hmm.
this is what
Absolutely.
happens, right? Um, and because I felt like I had no purpose, you and I spoke at length about me wanting, trigger warning to clinicians and patients, me wanting to commit suicide. I mean, I could not see, and you know this because there were lots of times we talked with the camera off. I'm laying in bed and I'm just like just a mess, a puddle of just tears
Hmm.
of just sickness. um I felt like I had no purpose. I thought to myself at that time in the beginning, okay, I can't teach, I can't exercise,
Hmm.
I can't eat at that time, I can't
Yeah.
socialize with my friends. Everything I know about myself has changed. So why would I want to be here on the planet anymore? Because each time I would even lift my finger or get out of bed to go to the restroom or go try to fix even a boiled egg, I'd be reduced to
Hmm.
intense brain fog, migraines, um,
Yeah.
dry mouth, headaches, body, like you, all of these things. So I think it's important that we identify the mental health aspects that can take place when a person experiences malaise, especially
Yeah.
when they don't know what to call it.
And one thing that I definitely just wanted to kind of add there as well, as we're talking about more, kind of having more in place essentially for, for those that will be affected by this, also being able to have clinicians and professionals that are in spaces such as this where they are able to learn from, other people, right? There may not always be a training that we can kind of go off to get this information. Sometimes it's actually, you
Yeah.
get that kind of firsthand
Mm-hmm.
knowledge from the lived experience of others, which I think is important. Again, to be able to talk to some of the people who
Mm-hmm.
have been advocating for some of these things for years, being able to speak to places that
Mm-hmm.
are continuing to build awareness, being able to again just be open, because the same way that our clients are kind of learning and putting words to. I mean, I can speak for self. This was not in my textbook that I can recall from school at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
really being
Right.
able to,
Right.
being humble and open to again
Right.
allowing other people's experiences. I think
Mm-hmm.
very often in society we rely very heavily on the objective views of things, right? This kind of places us, for
Mm-hmm.
some people,
Mm-hmm.
like having the subjective lead, and often that's through, again, like I was mentioning, like that experience of other people. So I just hope that more professionals can kind of get into that and really begin to kind of take that in, because a lot of the teaching of this will probably come from individuals that are managing this on a day to day, as opposed to being
Yes.
able to have a training already
Mm-hmm.
in place.
So my last question to you, it'll be kind of like a loaded question, um, is what are some of the mental health benefits of pacing? Right, number one, and how can we get communities of color where the patients in those communities are suffering with complex illnesses to accept those
Yeah.
benefits?
So
Mm-hmm.
the thing that stands out most in terms of some of the benefits with pacing is that it also encourages, and
Yeah.
as far as the looking at it from a mental health perspective, is being able to put boundaries in place, which is something that I feel.
Mm. Oh, wait a minute. Hold up. You know, this is our favorite word. Favorite word. Because and I tell you this back all the time. And I tell anybody who talks to me about boundaries, I say, Brittany said, I'm going to get a bumper sticker that says, Brittany says boundaries are not to
Hmm.
keep people out. They are to
Hmm.
let people in. So, if you said that to me like 4 years ago, and I never
Absolutely.
forgot that. So I love that. The main benefit of pacing is
Absolutely.
setting boundaries.
Yeah, I mean,
Proceed, please.
yeah,
Amen.
I definitely think that being able to have those boundaries in place will, essentially kind of set the framework of being able to kind of, again, have that self-awareness of, maybe today my body does not allow me to go to the concert. Or maybe, today my body does not allow for, family gatherings, right? Being able to really kind of set boundaries. I think that very often we think of boundaries as, hey, halt, don't go there. Whereas more so, you're
Yeah,
able to get the
yeah.
best version of me because I'm able to show up in my most authentic self. What that includes, what energy I have in this moment.
Come on. Mm,
What is my pain like,
mhm.
if at all, in that. So I think that the biggest thing that I would say is just the boundaries part, because it touches on so many things, right? Um, even down to identity, right? If you're a person that has always sort of
Mhm, mhm,
if you're a person who has always associated kind of worth to external things, rather it's job, rather it's how I show up for a friend, or some of those things, those boundaries kind of again allow more of an authentic version of you. It allows you to kind of show up and to show up in
mhm.
places of where your energy allows for that day. It's a way of challenging unrealistic expectations. Which I think, which I definitely think is something that comes up more often than not. And kind of as you were mentioning earlier, right? Hey, people know
Mm-hmm.
me from before, whether it's being a teacher, rather it is being social, rather it is being these things. So, with pacing,
Mm-hmm.
it prevents us from
Mm-hmm.
having to, meet yet another expectation that is not that we didn't put in place versus an
Mm.
expectation that was placed onto us. So if I would say the biggest of it would definitely be boundaries. But in terms of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
being able to just self-awareness, to listen to your body, to know that when you're having moments of kind of recognizing brain fog and all of those things, and you're able to really kind of recognize how those things are showing up for you, being able to check in with your anxiousness, right? Hey, what type of supports am I having in place? Do I have a
Mm-hmm.
therapist that I'm talking to? Do I have
Mm.
a supportive family?
Yeah.
Do I have friends? Do I have chosen family? Do I have some place that I am able to have of support?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that if anything, it has shown us the importance of being able to really kind of have like a holistic kind of support and community around us, which is definitely of
Yes.
importance. Again, when
Yeah.
you are managing, those depressive moments, when you are managing moments of like not, maybe not feeling as though you're wanting to kind of just wake up and put one foot in front of the other. So I think that those are things and those are things that will definitely kind of surface as we're kind of continuing to manage some of those mental health. But definitely, even finding clinicians or providers that themselves have had some experience with, so that you're able to find
Mm-hmm.
tools, and you're able to find ways that you can kind of create pacing that works for you. And it's something that's flexible. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely going to be important in terms of maintaining mental health.
And how would you guide or
Mhm.
advise patients of color who suffer with these complex illnesses? How would you advise them to consider and to look at pacing?
Yeah, absolutely. One one of the things that kind of first came to mind when you asked that is, kind of the idea of like pushing through. I can do it is what I've always done. It's my norm. I can get things done. That kind of like
Mm-hmm.
high
Yep.
functioning mentality.
Yep.
One of the first things that came to mind is just because you can doesn't mean you have to. And being able to, again, kind of find, in terms of pacing, being able to find literature that is supportive of, right? Being able to really connect with some of these resources that are out there. In terms of being able to accept the concept of pacing, is also being able to know that,
Mm-hmm.
slowing down does not prevent you from showing up. Um, you know Also,
Mm. Mm.
ensuring when we're
Yeah.
defining pacing,
Yeah.
that this idea of rest, right? Being able to ensure that we are rewiring how we see rest versus messages that have been given to us, right? Very very often you kind of hear,
Yeah.
especially I would say, like, especially in Black community, you kind of hear like, oh, I had worked three
Mm-hmm.
jobs and I got up and I did all of these things, and it's like, I think that that's amazing, right? But that doesn't
Yes.
that doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that's what we have
Mm-hmm.
to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So really, just again, kind of
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
rewiring and restructuring that idea and concept of rest, and really finding comfort. Excuse me, really
Mm-hmm.
finding comfort in the calmness. I think that very often people of color tend to,
Mm-hmm.
we when it comes to kind of having to navigate in high conflict areas, we probably do our best work, right? But being able to
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of, find like,
Right.
hey, if you could allow
Yes.
yourself a moments where you don't
Yes.
have to be
So
hyper
true.
vigilant and be on, right? So when it comes to pacing, really just,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, above all, really just kind of educating and really encouraging the rewiring and messaging around rest, and ensuring that it's showing up based on your experiences now versus messages that have been given to you.
This has been an extraordinary conversation. Can you share where people can find you so that they can get
Sure,
any
absolutely.
resources from you or
So
any
I
treatment?
am on, in terms of directories, I am on Therapy for Black Girls. On
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, my
Yeah.
page
Yeah.
is available. That is Brittany underscore Spencer underscore. Our website, as I mentioned earlier, I
Mm-hmm.
am a clinician at Space Between Counseling Services, located in Mount Vernon here in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
On our website, you can be able to kind of take a look at not just myself, but some of our other clinicians as well. Being able to kind of find what works and what fits for you.
Mm-hmm.
We do
Yep.
offer free consults, so being able to also kind of have a conversation to kind of see like what works for you. I'm on Facebook, Brittany Spencer there as well. And those are kind of my main places to find me outside of virtually or in the office.